So, just got to the hotel now, and I just wanted to tell you about a quick story. We were taxiing off one of the runways. We've got a live runway to cross, which is normally we land on runway. The takeoff runway is the one we were crossing, and then we taxi up to the big parking area to taxi to the gate so you guys can get off. But as we were waiting across the runway, one of the airplanes got up to a reasonably high speed, and then all of a sudden hit the brakes, hammered itself to a stop. Must have had some sort of issue and did what we call a rejected takeoff. And I thought to myself, wow, I bet there's not a single passenger on board that aeroplane who hasn't got, adrenaline flooding through their body. They aren't worried or scared. And I bet those anxious passengers, the ones with a fear of flying, are really, really scared. So I thought, now that I'm back at the hotel, I'd talk you through what happened. It's not great in here. So I'm going to go and do a bit of a walk and talk. I'm going down to the shops, to the supermarket to get some food. So I thought there's no better time than to talk you through what a rejected takeoff is, what the pilots are doing, what the sensation and the feelings that you're going to do, the reasons for it, why you're safe, why sometimes it ends up going into the air, even though they get an emergency on the runway. So yeah, let's walk and talk, and I'll talk you through a rejected takeoff. I thought I'd take you through one of what I think is probably one of the most dramatic things that can happen on board an airline outside of turbulence, and I think it could be up there rated higher than a go-round for the amount of dramatic feeling when you aren't really expecting it, and that is a rejected takeoff, where we are taken off up to speed. All of a sudden, instead of getting into the air, the engines go quiet, then they go really noisy, and then there's a huge deceleration felt, and it can take everyone by surprise, not the pilots, because we're ready for it and we've briefed for it. But yeah, it can be extremely dramatic. For nervous flyers, it can put you into an instant panic and make you think that you're in real danger. But I'm going to talk you through it and make sure that you understand that if it ever does happen to you, that you understand what's going on, trying to relate it to everyday normal things so that you aren't as spooked by it as a lot are when it happens to them. My name's Flyman Simon. I'm an airline captain flying the Airbus A350 all over the world. I've got nearly 30 years experience in aviation, 25 years flying. Got all sorts of military aeroplanes and then 3 different commercial airliners, all heavy, big ones. For the last 5, maybe 10 years, I've been helping people who have a fear of flying as a fear of flying coach. These videos as well seem to help. Do a lot of Q&As, and I've started on YouTube, so hopefully this hits and it helps a lot of people feel a lot more confident on board airliners. This week's subject is, rejected takeoffs. Right, I promise you, I'm not trying to look like Maverick. It's just I am squinting in this Florida sunshine. I'm here for 24 hours, flown from Heathrow to Florida, flying back later tonight. I've taken a nice walk out to Target, one of the shops where we pick up a lot of goods that you can't get in the UK or a lot cheaper. Walking back, let's get into it. It doesn't take the pilots by surprise. There is a little bit of sort of shock factor, obviously. It's a very heavy aeroplane, a lot of energy to stop. And it is quite a big sort of maneuver to get it from takeoff speed to stopping on the runway. We'll talk more about that so you know exactly what's going on in a moment. So cancelling a takeoff, you may think, obviously it's a big hairy event. You are already at a rather heightened state because you are undergoing like quite a large acceleration in a bit of a unfamiliar environment, being in the aeroplane cabin. There's all of that noise, the forces, the acceleration. You're expecting to get up into the air, and then all of a sudden there's a huge deceleration, lots and lots of noise. The engines go quiet at first while they go from takeoff power down to idle. Then we engage the reverse thrusters, which act like huge engine brakes. And then we put the power back on the engine to make sure that reverse thrust is at the maximum that we can to stop the aeroplane. The aeroplane comes to a huge halt, and as I say, you are thrown out of the comfort level that you were at, which was a little bit anxious to start with, and now you're in what you think is a big danger zone. So as a passenger, it's completely normal that you would feel very anxious and very shocked when this happens. From the pilot's point of view, we practice this every 6 months in the flight simulator. We're given simulated emergencies and failures, and we have to stop the aeroplane in time. Sometimes it's maximum speed, sometimes it's short speed when huge amounts of thrust are put on. And we've handled it many, many times all the way throughout our career, although it's still in the live environment. Obviously a little bit of startle factor for us, but luckily we've briefed it, we've talked it through with the other pilot, what we would do, so it just comes second nature to us. We've practiced it, we've just briefed it before we take off, and we can stop the aeroplane safely. Let's go through some of the reasons why we might stop the aeroplane. We're going to stop the aeroplane at any time if it is safer to keep it on the ground than it is to keep it in the air. And there's a major cutoff with this, and it's a speed that we work out, which is our maximum speed Every runway is different, different lengths, where we could stop the aeroplane in the runway available plus a nice safety margin, because we don't want to push the limits. We want to make sure that we do stop. As with all things in aviation, we add this big safety buffer on just to make sure, that we are with the safest operation that we can possibly be. So why would pilots stop an aeroplane on the runway then? Well, there's various different factors. Obviously, the aeroplane, if it has any failures or faults that are going to, stop the plane flying as it should, we have an alert and a warning system. It's an emergency sort of system on the aeroplane, and it will flash up to the pilots the warning lights. It'll tell us what the fault is, and quite often it will say, if you're in the air, whether you should land as soon as possible or land as soon as practicable. When we're on the ground, some of those failures are inhibited. If it's something small that isn't really going to affect the flight, just a small minor electrical fault or something that doesn't affect the flying at all, we don't really want to stop a 300-ton aeroplane. So we'd really only want to stop the aeroplane for a set of predefined sort of failures or emergencies. So outside of the aeroplane, there's lots of other reasons. Air traffic control may have, they're human. They may have issued the takeoff clearance in error and then realized it, so then cancel the takeoff clearance. So we then have to stop. They could also have a vehicle that's entering the runway that shouldn't be, so they want to stop us. There could be an aircraft flies into the sort of airport environment when it shouldn't, the private plane or something, again, there's many different reasons. We've had animals on the runway. There's all sorts of different reasons why they've cancelled takeoff. At the end of the day, we need to know that if we're told one of these reasons or we see one of these reasons ourselves, we will stop. So once that decision of the reasons why we would stop an aeroplane is made, getting taken out by some sort of hornet or wasp here, get away. So once we've got this defined reasons of why we would stop the aeroplane, we need to know for sure, and it may not sound that intuitive, but we need to know that we will actually be able to stop the aeroplane. So how do we know that? Well, it's all worked out beforehand. We have what's called a V1 speed. That V1 speed is very technical. What it really means is that if we stop below that speed, the aeroplane will stop in the runway available with a safety margin. If we go beyond that speed and we try and stop the airplane, it isn't guaranteed to stop, and it probably won't. You'll go to the end of the runway and you'll go off the end of the runway, which is obviously not ideal. So it's obviously worked out by computers. It's very complicated and complicated. Depends on the aircraft weight, which can change. My aircraft weight can change by 40-50 tons, depending on how much fuel I have and cargo and passengers. So the aircraft weight dramatically changes. We fly from airports all over the world. Those runways can be anything. I've taken off on 6,000 foot runways. I've taken off on 14,000 foot runways. The big 14,000 foot one, you could get up to takeoff speed on any day of the week and stop right at that takeoff speed, and you'll stop on the runway available. It'll be a very different case on that 6,000 foot one. So we need to know that this works in advance. So let's relate it to a normal everyday thing. Imagine, your mate gives you a challenge in your car. You've got a car park like this one that I'm walking around in at the moment. You've got a length of car park, and at the other end of the car park, there's a wall. And your mate bets you, what's the maximum speed you can get to, hammer the brakes and stop before you crash into that wall. So you're not going to try the maximum speed you think. You're going to get up to 30 miles an hour, hit the brakes. I stopped 100 meters short. Now I can do 50, then 60, 70 miles an hour stops you, 50 foot short. You're probably only going to go a couple miles an hour over that, get a tiny bit closer to the wall. Right, I've definitely stopped. I'm not going to push it anymore. And that is sort of now the maximum speed that I can get up to in this car park, hammer the brakes on and stop before the wall, is 73 miles an hour. That's the basics of how it's all worked out. If you came back the next day and the car park was a bit icy and wet, you're not going to go at 73 miles an hour, are you? Because you're going to skid into that wall, and that figure on that day wouldn't work. It's like that for the aeroplane. It changes every day. So we work it out for every single takeoff, and at that V1 speed, that means that once we hit that, if we then get a big emergency, we aren't going to stop. So we have to take off. And the aeroplane is made and it's designed to be able to take off with any major emergency above that. So we can lose an engine and we'll still get airborne safely. But below that speed, we'd rather not take a failed engine into the air. So once you have that speed, you know that Once you get up to it and beyond it, you're going to get in the air. We'll talk about that another day. Because obviously we've all seen on the news, we've seen aeroplanes going down the runway with big, at night time, flashes and sparks coming out of an engine, and that aeroplane still gets in the air. And I'm sure a lot of you wonder, why don't they just stop? Because they won't have enough runway ahead of them to stop. So once we've decided we're going to stop, you then need to stop the aeroplane in as quick a time as possible. So we'll bring the thrust levers to idle. My aircraft brakes itself, but a lot of aeroplanes where you'll have to hammer the brakes on. They have spoilers that come out on the ground, and they will, act like big sails and stop the airflow. The engines go into reverse. Once we come to a stop, you down the back are going to be slightly panicked and slightly, as I say, a bit of adrenaline rushing around. Just try and stay nice and calm. Don't worry, it's all in hand. All you've done is like an emergency stop in a car, but it's in an airliner. And when you come to a stop, the pilots are then going to assess the emergency. The emergency services will be on their way already. You'll see flashing blue lights. Everything's going to get a bit chaotic, but just know that that stopping of that aeroplane was calculated. It's what the aircraft's designed to do. It's the safest thing to do as well, and just listen to the cabin crew announcements from then. Normally, you can have these things happen at different speeds. We can have it at 20, 30 miles an hour and the aircraft will stop no problem whatsoever. You can then taxi off, the pilots will reset everything, and then you'll take off again. If it's at a really high speed, up to 120, 130 miles an hour, you're going to have really hot brakes. You're probably going to have stopped for a major system failure on the aeroplane, so it's going to need to be looked at by the engineers and all the rest of it. So you're probably not going to be going anywhere. Although now and again it is just for a normal reason at high speed, and after a good taxi round and a good reset, you are still able to go again. So don't panic if you do. If you go, you're safe. Hopefully this has explained quite a bit about a rejected takeoff or an aborted takeoff or a cancelled takeoff, whatever you want to call it. And you now know that it's an extremely rare event. You know why it happens, and you know that there's huge safety margins involved, and that if you've stopped, it's going to be safe. If you get taken into the air, the aircraft again is designed to fly with whatever failure you've had, and the pilots will be dealing with it, and you'll probably be coming back round for a pretty swift landing once they've got their checks done and they've chatted to air traffic control. But I'll do another video on that for those of you who are interested. For anything else, this video that's popping up on the screen now is the one that YouTube thinks you should watch next. Fly happy, fly safe.